Hello, and welcome to Bruce Mackey's Library. I'm your host, Mix Lucy, and we're here to talk about Noel Buys a Suit. This is the last Kids of Degrassi Street book that we will be talking about in full. I may bring up other Kids of Degrassi Street books randomly for special bonus episodes. I haven't fully decided about that yet, but this is the last one we'll be talking about in full, and it was published on January 1st, 1988. It was illustrated by Debbie Herna. She now has a design company with her business partner, Eric Siergist. She has 7 books listed as her distinct works on Goodreads, and I'll be tagging her design website in the sources down below. The editor for this one is Doris Cowan. She is an editor and translator who mostly translates Japanese to English. I will not be putting her LinkedIn in the source down below because that is doxing. This is dedicated to Bob Vale. I will read the dedication in full. To Bob Vale, who believed in the kids from the beginning. I looked at the IMDb for Bob Vale Toronto, and it says camera and electrical department as well as acting and producing. His first camera job was in 1965 for something called Vapors. I'm not really sure what that is because I'm not exactly interested in things from 1965. But I thought that was pretty cool. And the description on the Formac Lormer website says, "What do you do when your dad is marrying someone you don't like? When you're accused of stealing for no good reason? When you have to choose between a friend and a surefire chance to make money?" Noel Buys a Suit and Other Stories shows young people who are faced with challenging dilemmas and respond with spirit and ingenuity. These stories offer delightful evidence of youthful creativity and resourcefulness in the face of hard questions. Based on the groundbreaking Kids of Degrassi Street TV show, this book offers a sensitive and engaging look at the challenges of childhood. As I always do, I looked at the Goodreads reviews and ratings. This is rated 3.67 stars. There's only 3 ratings and no reviews. There's 1 5-star and 2 3-stars. So, if you do come across this book in your life and read it, please give it a rating. It would be nice to see who else likes this, because 3 ratings is that's abysmal. Episodes included, there's 3. Obviously, the titular title episode, Noel Buys a Suit, is episode number 4. The middle episode is Sophie Minds the Store, which is episode number 6. And the last one is Pete Takes a Chance, episode number 8. So I do like this layout of episodes. I like that it goes in order of the premieres. And it really only skips 1 episode in between each one. And I kind of like that a lot of these characters are friends with each other. They know each other pretty well. It fits nicely, I'll say. So we're going to start with the title episode, Noel Buys a Suit. And normally I start the episodes by pointing out the picture that is at the beginning of the episode novelization. But this is the first and only Kids of Degrassi Street book that doesn't put a pic before each episode. And instead, it lays the pictures throughout each episode. And they're all pretty small, around half-page size pictures for Noel Buys a Suit. It changes up for different episodes, and I'll try to describe the pictures as best I can without being able to provide the picture for you for now. And my first note is on page number 2, and it just says, "I didn't know Gail's maiden name before." And that happens because Noel Kennard and his dad are at the paint store checking out the paint with Gail, and this says, Out of the corner of his eye, he was watching his father, who was leaning across the counter talking to Gail Freeman, the checkout clerk. So her name is Gail Freeman before she marries Noel's dad and becomes Gail Kennard. And page 4 has my next note, where I do get to describe the very first picture. So this is a picture of Noel kind of having a sour scowl, which is how I described it in my notes. He's kind of giving the stank eye, if you will, or like a death glare, whatever you would like to call it, to his dad and Gail, who are at the checkout giving the paint order. And you can just tell that Noel does not want to be here and really doesn't like Gail. He just looks so angry. I don't know how else to describe it. The hair is drawn very well. And I do love that they got the plaid shirt, like, very perfect. And he's wearing the vest over his plaid shirt. I'm the kind of person, I don't understand the point of vests. I don't like vests. I think they're kind of dumb. That's just me. That's just who I am. But they drew it very well. And I'll give them that. They did a great job. And then on page 5, we kind of find out how long it took at the paint store. And it says, "Yeah," Noel said, wondering why it had taken nearly an hour to buy 8 gallons of paint. "Well, I guess I know the answer," he thought. "It's all because of her." And they really italicized the word her. Ever since his dad had first met her nearly a year ago, so now we know how long they've known each other before they decided to get married, nearly a year, at the store, things had been changing. And then last month, the big announcement had been made. He and Gail were getting married. So now we know how long Noel and Lisa knew about the wedding announcement before it actually happened. Nearly a month. Last month. So nearly a month. And then I'm gonna just read into my next note. "Gail's okay, I guess," Noel told himself. "She's nice enough, but why does she have to interfere in our family? We've done fine in the 8 years since Mom died. Well, I suppose it must have been tough for Dad at first, when Lisa and I were only little kids, but there was Auntie Jean before she and Uncle Jack went to Vancouver, and good neighbors, and then when I grew up a bit, I could help around the house. Yeah, we've managed okay. We don't need anybody else." So his mom passed 8 years ago. I had not known that before. I don't think it was never really said in the show how long Noel's mom had been passed away. And 8 years is a long time for sure, especially for his dad. But I can see why he never really coped. Losing your mom is not something you fully get over. It's tough, and I'm very happy that Degrassi discusses these tough issues. So yeah, I just wanted to point out 8 years, as well as how his family was coping with help from other family members and neighbors. And then on the next page, we get a bit more about Noel and what he likes in life and how Gail's kind of messing that up. And it says, "Noel lifted a supermarket shopping bag from the van, took it straight to the kitchen, and laid out on the table all the ingredients for the evening meal. He enjoyed cooking and often wished he knew how to do the really complicated things, like lemon pie and pot roast and layer cake. Tonight he was going to make his own special peanut butter soup with fried chicken and baked potatoes. As Lisa always liked to be in charge of the dessert, it had to be something simple enough for a 10-year-old, which I did not catch on to the fact that Lisa was 10 at this point, because to me, every age looks the same. For tonight, Noel had bought coconut macaroons, so all she had to do was arrange them on the plate. So Noel really enjoys cooking, and we see later on that Gail tries to do the cooking for him, and that explains a lot of why he's upset. He wants to do the cooking. He wants to learn more. And as I read into my next note, he finds Gail and Lisa superfluous, according to this book. Since Gail was coming, he decided to take extra care with his part of the meal. He'd show her how well they could manage without any superfluous females around. He dropped the chicken pieces one by one into a bag of ready-mixed savory coating. So this is shake and bake, basically. He scrubbed the potatoes and put a tub of sour cream with chilies on the table, ready for filling them. He mixed the peanut butter with cornstarch, milk, and seasoning, and put the saucepan on the cooker, ready for heating. He looked at the kitchen clock, time to put the potatoes in the oven to bake. Then he'd set the living room table with the works, everything in the right place, water glasses, and maybe even a candle. He'd show her. So he's like really just trying to show her, we don't need you, we've got this, I can do all the things, I like to cook, I'm in charge. And they have another picture in this book that I'll try to describe again. It's apparently the living room table with a tablecloth and 4 places set with like nice little placemats that look like they're sewn, and water glasses, salt and pepper, and like a little candle and everything. It looks really cute. They did a really great job with this picture, in my opinion. So you can skip a few more pages before I get to my next note. So it's not until page number 13. And we get to learn a little bit more about the rabbits, which I absolutely love that we've already read Casey Draws the Line. So we already have the reference of the Big Rabbit episode. This is way before that, when there's actually more than one rabbit this time. And they actually have names. Instead of everyone just calling it rabbit, these rabbits have names. So the following Saturday, Noel, with his friends Ida Lucas and Chuck Riley, was leaning over the hutch at the end of the backyard, feeding his 2 elderly rabbits, Mickey and Goofy. Ida, who always had to shove her oar in, was offering advice. Carrots are better, Noel. Rabbits like carrots. Chuck disagreed. I read that rabbits should eat grains. Yeah, well, said Ida, I saw it on TV. They like carrots best. Where'd you see it? Asked Chuck. In a Bugs Bunny cartoon? So I read into my next note because in the episode, Chuck just says, where'd you see that in a cartoon? And I'm guessing it was because they couldn't say Bugs Bunny on TV due to some kind of copyright, but I'm not 100% sure. I just found it very interesting because these books seem to be more of the rough drafts of the script before they do the actual filming. This is my assumption based on the actual Casey Draws the Line episode, where they didn't have any of the parts of them writing down in their books like they do in the episode, like writing down in class, where they're retelling the story. But in the book, you're just actually in the story that they're telling. So I just found it very interesting that they named the rabbits, and there's 2 of them this time. We don't ever learn what happens to these 2 rabbits and why Mickey and Goofy don't exist anymore. But what I'm also thinking is because they don't name these rabbits in the episode, they probably couldn't use the names Mickey and Goofy as well, just like they probably couldn't use Bugs Bunny. So they couldn't keep naming them after cartoon characters. They just had to take their names away and just call them Rabbit. And I don't know why they took away one of the rabbits, and now there was 2, now there's only 1. So in Casey Draws the Line, I just kind of assumed that the second rabbit was somebody else's, and that he only had the 1. I just find it very interesting. And the next interesting note, where I literally describe it as interesting, is on page number 15. My note says, interesting to learn about the chandelier and how Noel sees Lisa, as well as she's not talking to herself in the episode. Although, I'm sure it's normal to talk to yourself at her age, to be honest. Because I know I did. Anyway, it says, when Noel got home, the first thing he saw was Lisa, perched on a stepladder in the hall. And he was inclined to agree with Chuck, because Chuck had said that Noel's sister was a little weird. He was inclined to agree with Chuck. Lisa was acting a bit weird. She was covered with paint and muck, and she was talking to herself as she removed pieces of cut glass from the brightly colored chandelier she and Noel had bought for their dad one Christmas. She'd always admired it, and it had been hanging in the hall year after year ever since. So I don't know how her and Noel could afford to buy their dad a chandelier. I do find that very interesting. I had never thought of that because the chandelier is fancy. Like, in my mind, you don't own a chandelier unless you're fancy, just because that's just what I picture. And my next note's on the very next page, page number 16. This just really pissed me off, and I'm just going to rant about it for a bit before I get into it. Noel and his dad think that painting is like a really, really special job. Like, you gotta be really good at it. It takes like a special way to do it. You gotta be perfect at it. Like, it really ticked me off. And our next picture is of Gail and Noel's dad painting like they do in the episode where they paint the wall a new color. And Gail paints the trim, and Noel's dad paints the wall with a roller. And they both get on her about how she's painting weird in this book. So it says, his dad and Gail were painting the trim. Gail, wearing rubber gloves and a scarf around her hair, was dabbing at the woodwork. Noel noted with some scorn, as if she was Leonardo da Vinci in the Sistine Chapel, or was it Michelangelo? It says. Whichever. Her years in the paint store hadn't taught her much about house decorating. Not like his dad, who was working with those professional sweeping brushstrokes that really got things done. Even his dad thinks that Gail's way of doing it was a bit unusual. What are you doing? He asked, laughing. She looked up from her work. What do you mean, what am I doing? I'm painting. You could have fooled me. Like, painting is not rocket science, okay? Painting is just putting color on the wall, however the fuck you do it, in my mind. So that just really ticked me off. But, like, hearing Noel's mind, like, what does she think? She's, like, painting the Sistine Chapel? Like, I don't know, she's just trying to be a bit more precise. Like, oh my gosh. Editing me feels the need to reiterate. She's painting the trim. Like, the trim is smaller and it's meant to be neater anyway. And she's using, like, an actual paintbrush, and he's using, like, a whole ass roller painting the whole ass wall. So her way does make a lot of sense for what she's doing versus what he is doing. And also, she was a cashier. Being a cashier at a paint store is not going to teach you about painting. And it's not meant to teach you about painting either. Anyway, my next few notes are about the whole title thing of him buying a suit, the main point of the title. And they start on page number 22 with the details of how they got to the suit store. The three kids rode the streetcar west to Queen and Yonge. Now, this is spelled Yonge. So if it's not Yonge, I don't know what it is, and I'm sorry. A couple of blocks along Yonge, down a side street, Chuck stopped outside Mr. Sully, the Suit King. So, Mr. Sully, the Suit King is what they named the suit store in this book. If you've seen the episode, you know that they use Moore's, the Suit People, as the name of the store. That's where they go. That's the location. And they give them a special thing in the end credits in the episode. So I don't know why they changed it in the book. I'm just going to assume again that this was the script that they passed out. They just gave a generic suit place in case they wouldn't be able to use Moore's. And then they were able to use Moore's, and Eve Jennings just never cared to change it. I would have loved to have Moore's as the name in this book, and I wouldn't have made a note about it if we had the same name. But I just find it so interesting that, that they didn't go back and change it. Anyway, my next note is how they describe the salesman on page number 23. It says, she gave the rack a spin that made it squeak in protest. A salesman with a smile like a shark's and teeth to match came swimming up. May I help you? I just find that interesting. He's a shark. Because, I don't know, it's just kind of like they describe him as sleazy in my brain. And I don't have another note until page number 26 because that is where we get our first full page picture, which would usually be at the front of the episode novelization right before they start it, like in most of our other Kids of Degrassi Street books. So this is a picture of Noel wearing the whole suit in front of the mirror with Chuck standing outside the dressing room, and Ida is there with her pigtail braids and like she's got her hands in her pockets. She's wearing little rain boots. It's honestly so cute. The way they really captured Noel, like with his head tilted to the side, and they've got like the sales rack behind him in the mirror saying grand sale in full letters, like all caps. And Chuck's wearing his little toque, and it's so fucking cute. Like, this artist just did a really great job, and I can't emphasize that enough. But our very next note, it's on the next page, page number 27, where you kind of see Noel's mindset and how he's kind of worried about money. And it says, "If it's okay," Noel said mulishly. The salesman glided up. If he says it's a mistake. A good suit like this on the sales rack, Noel thought. I'll ... I'll ... There was no need to worry. The salesman whipped a tape measure from around his neck and began to make adjustments. Very smart indeed. It was just what Noel thought, too. The sleeves are too long, growled Ida. We can fix that, no problem, just a little alteration. In a matter of seconds, he had turned the sleeves up and was measuring around Noel's ankles. So Noel was really, really worried about the price. Although his dad only gave him like $54, but his dad was like, that cleaned me out. Like, I don't have any more cash. Okay, I want to reiterate here, I did say only $54, but today I got excited about finding a $10 bill in the dryer. Like, I get excited about getting clothes for $1 in a thrift store. Like, I was raised poor, and I love that Degrassi has normal kids as their main characters, and they're not, like, super glossy until, like, Next Class, which is, like, my least favorite thing about Next Class, is it's too glossy, too made over. So, I do like that they point that out, that, like, hey, these are kind of lower class people, but they don't make a huge deal of it. Like, it's fine. They're fine. They found something. They're good. And on the very next page, they make the tie sound like it's a different color than it actually looks in the episode. And that's kind of, again, what I was saying, that they're kind of basing this off of the script, and they were able to find, like, a different tie when they were going through the props at the actual suit store. So they make the tie sound like it's a light pink with brown, but it actually was more of a dark green with brown in the show. And it says, the salesman looked as if it would ruin his day if Noel wore a blue tie. Personally, I think a blue tie would have went better, but the salesman just wanted to make a sale in my mind. Anyway, like a magician, he produced a shimmering tie patterned in shades of apricot and coffee. Just the thing, nothing like a tie to pull an outfit together. He draped it against Noel's chest. So that's why I was like, apricot, that sounds pink to me. And coffee sounds like a lightish brown. Because I picture coffee with creamer all the time, so lightish brown, but maybe darker if you're picturing it without creamer. Either way, that was just like really interesting to me that they don't update this based on what happens in the episode. They keep it like the scripts. And on page number 32, we get what I called an interesting monologue in my notes. It says, Noel resented being asked to come into his own living room and shrugged offhandedly. It's just a suit. Well, what color is it? Gail persisted. Why did she have to keep on about it? He'd tell his dad later, but he wasn't going to make a big deal of it right now. So he's just like really sassy, and he doesn't like her asking all these questions, and he's just going to have a private chat with his dad later. I found that very interesting to like have that little monologue of him. And honestly, yeah, I will say I would be upset someone asking me to come into my own living room too. Like, I live here, okay? I'll come in when I want to. I'm a little sassy too. And you'll remember earlier I pointed out notes of Noel in the kitchen doing a lot of cooking. And that kind of comes back here in my next notes on page number 34. My note says, "It seems like the kitchen felt like his domain, and now it's being taken over." So the book says, Gail was at the house every day, decorating, cleaning, and worst of all, moving things. When Noel came to put the supper dishes away one evening, he found that the place where the plates had been kept for years was occupied by cans and jars. He breathed noisily, making a big production number over being unable to find an empty shelf. Gail couldn't help noticing. She said, "I thought while we're in such a mess, we might as well reorganize everything." So he is just like reinserting that this is his domain. This is where he knows where things are. And honestly, I kind of agree. People moving in and moving shit around, that would piss me off to like the nth degree. Just ask where things are and adjust. Okay? But either way, there's some British slang 4 pages later on where I made another note because I really didn't know what the heck this meant and I had to Google it. So, page number 38, a grouse is a large bird, but she's using it to mean rant because British. That is my note. It just says because British. I used sticky notes and I ran out of room. And the page says, a few minutes later, he was reliving his feelings in a good grouse to Chuck and Ida as they helped him unload rolls of fiberglass insulation from the van. I might be pronouncing it wrong. It is spelled Grouse. So if that's not pronounced grouse, I'm sorry, but what else was I supposed to think? That says grouse to me. Anyway, on page number 39, they made up a kid. Like, they just made up a name completely. In the episode, Ida says, when Jason's father remarried, his stepmother sent him away to live with his grandparents. And for the longest time, I was like, oh, I should really Google who the heck Jason is. And my mind was like, well, maybe they'll change his name in the book, because sometimes they do that. And I'll make points of it later on because it happens in this book too, where they just insert random kids in different places. But I Googled it. I Googled Jason, Kids of Degrassi Street. And what came up was Jason Cox, played by Tyson Talbot, who also played Billy Martin on Kids of Degrassi Street. And I was like, okay, so Jason is just a made-up kid. Google only finds Jason Cox. They made up a random kid's name, which is fine. Fine. I just wanted to make sure y'all knew that Jason does not exist in the Kids of Degrassi Street. Which, I mean, I kind of like that they added this world building to make Noel more upset and more worried about what could happen to him. Because it's impactful. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the big fit and had all these deep moments that made him grow as a character. I'm sure. And I have to point out that this is like, Lisa is kind of just going through a joke book phase in this episode. And I Googled one of the jokes because I didn't understand it. And in the episode, no one understands it. So I was like, let me Google this because it will be fun. So here's a side tangent about a joke that's in the episode. Okay, it says, knock knock. Who's there? Asked Gail through a mouthful of pins. Irish stew, answered Lisa. Turn around, honey. I can't get this hymn straight. Irish stew who? Irish stew in the name of the law. She looked up from the book. I don't get it. I don't get it either, said Gail. And then I Googled, and it says, This joke is in the memoir of Adolf Hitler, written by an Irish-English comedian named Spike Milligan. So, Irish stew is supposed to sound like I arrest you. It doesn't. It really doesn't. But I got really uncomfortable knowing that this joke is in the memoir of Adolf Hitler, which is written by a comedian. And I need to Google when that came out, actually. That book was published in 1971, and this episode aired on May 30th, 1982. So that book had been out for around 11 years, and yet they still included this joke in the episode. That makes me very uncomfortable. I'm sorry for the side tangent if that I needed the side tangent. I needed to know. I was curious. I had to Google it. And now we're all uncomfortable. Thanks. We'll move on. And we will move on to page number 45, where my next note says, he feels so alone in this moment. And that is when Noel and Chuck are in Noel's bedroom talking about Gail and how she feels about the suit and the shirt that she bought for him. And he has to go to Moore's to buy a new shirt. This is the actual moment when I realized they changed the name of the suit place. Earlier, when I made the note out loud to you, that note was not in my notebook. I had actually thought that they were calling the salesman Solly instead of saying Mr. Solly's suit place. I thought the salesman was Mr. Solly, which made sense to me. Since Moore's is a local suit store, I didn't think it would be a copyright issue or anything like that. I don't know why they changed the name still. But the book says the salesman at Mr. Solly's had the suit boxed and ready. And that is when I noticed, oh, Mr. Solly is the name of, like, the suit place. I felt very slow. And then my next note is on page number 48. And this note is about Gail and Noel's fight after he picks up a new shirt and starts getting really upset about her trying to send him away, even though she was not trying to. But Ida and Chuck, mostly Ida, really got in his brain about that. So my note just says, poor Noel is about to cry. And, boy, is he. It says, he slammed his room door and collapsed on the bed, breathing heavily and balling his fist. His blood was pounding in his ears, and he wondered why he wanted to burst into tears. Something he hadn't done since he was about 8. Downstairs, Gail, confused and upset, clutched the stair rail. She shook her head despairingly at Mr. Kennard. I don't know what the matter is. I was just trying to help him. Noel heard his doorknob rattle. There was a knock, and his dad asked if he could come in. He was in no mood to talk to anyone. He called, What for? I told you, I'm not going to wear that stupid shirt, and I'm not going to the wedding. He heard his dad sigh. Then, after a moment, he asked quietly, It's not about the shirt, is it? Yeah, dead right. It was Gail muscling in and changing things. His dad went on, Gail isn't going to send you away. I don't know how you got that idea. And it mostly is just the conversation in the episode, but there's a good picture of his dad, like, turning the doorknob, and there's a little sign on his door that says Noel's room. It's actually really cute. And we get some of his inner thoughts on the next page. It says, He really began to cry at the thought of someone coming between him and his dad, spoiling the special closeness they'd always had. He couldn't answer when the door was rattled again and his father called, "Noel, come on, let me in, please. Noel, I'll always need you. More than you know. You're my son." But she's not my mother. My real mother's dead. Noel began to wonder what it would have been like if his mother had always been there, sharing things with his dad. I guess I wouldn't have minded that, he thought. But Gail, arriving out of nowhere, thinking she could just jump in and a ready-made family waiting for her? "We don't need her," he called in a quavering voice. After a moment, his father said, "Noel, I need her. I love her. And I love you too, very much. Nothing's changed between you and me. But Gail is going to be my wife. I hope you can learn to accept that." Snuffling like a little kid, Noel repeated, "I don't want to go to your wedding." There was silence outside, and then he heard his dad walk slowly downstairs. So I don't remember any of that conversation right there in the episode, but it's just really nice to get that. To get kind of how he got to the point where he was ready to go to the wedding. Because he really just walked straight out the door in the episode. And we get more of that on page number 52. Noel sat on the bed thinking what a mess everything was. He tried to see it from his dad's point of view. 8 years on his own, bringing up 2 kids, and now he seemed so happy. Ever since he met Gail, he'd been full of fun, enjoying life. The last thing he needed was someone wrecking it for him. He probably hates it when I'm mean to Gail, he thought, because he wants her to be happy too. Doesn't want her feelings hurt. Noel sighed and picked up the shirt Gail had bought for him. Then he opened the box and took out his check shirt and the new navy blue shirt. He put the 2 shirts side by side against the suit and considered them pensively. It was Saturday, the morning of the wedding, nearly 11 o'clock, and still Noel hadn't come out of his room. And then it kind of goes to the part in the episode, and I don't need to read all of that. And my next note is about another picture. It's the last picture in this episode of Noel wearing the suit and Gail's shirt. They're at the end of the stairs, and his dad is there, and they're just kind of smiling at each other. And it comes with one final thought from Noel. With her hands on his shoulders, she said, "Oh, Noel, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings. I guess I have a lot to learn about living in a family." Well, he thought, at least she's honest about it. She does have a lot to learn. And I guess I'll just have to be patient. Who knows? In time, I may even get to like her. He said, "We'd better go. The wedding's at 11, you know." "Yes, sir," said Gail. Noel took her arm and escorted her down the steps to where his smiling father waited by the car. So, I will say that was a bit stuck up still. I feel like he could have stated that he has a lot to learn too about acceptance and learning about other people's feelings and how to be kind to other people. But it's still kind of sweet. I still really like it. And it leads us into our next episode in the book. That is Sophie Minds the Store, episode number 6. Where our very first note is actually about parentification. So I should add the trigger warning, parentification happens. Parentification is a psychological term that refers to a role reversal in families where a child takes on the responsibilities of a parent. This can manifest in various ways, such as a child acting as a caretaker for younger siblings, which does not happen in this episode, or mediating between parents. Kinda, but not really what happens in this episode. In parentification scenarios, children may be compelled to manage their parents' problems. That's kind of what's happening when she's taking over the store. Or take on adult responsibilities. Again, that's what's happening in this episode. Which can lead to emotional burdens that are developmentally inappropriate. This phenomenon can have significant impacts on a child's development and emotional well-being. Okay. That is from psychologytoday.com. There you go. So, my first note just says, parentification is such an advantage. An advantage is in air quotes, which you can't see, but I'm doing them. Because this is about Sophie Brindicus winning the math competition, where she wins the radio headphone thingies. It says, Chuck looked longingly at a picture of the radio. It was really neat. You could wear it over your head or put it down around your shoulders if you weren't listening to it. Just what he'd like to buy his dad for Christmas. If only radios didn't cost so much. He would have gone in for the contest himself, but he was only average at math. No whiz kid like Sophie. Of course, she had an advantage. Her parents ran the Degrassi grocery, and Sophie often helped out when they were busy. He caught sight of her ahead in the corridor, getting books out of her locker, and she was already wearing her new radio. So, yes, parentification, or working at your parents' store, is truly such an advantage, according to Chuck. And I wish he would see it differently, like you'd think that he would, because he's often having to do parentification himself, as in taking care of his brother Pete, because his father is in jail. Like, you'd think he'd see it a little bit differently. He's not going around saying that taking care of his brother all the time is an advantage. That would prepare him for a job of babysitting or something like that. Like, no, he doesn't see it that way at all. So it's just, that was interesting to me. And we find out more about Chuck and his father being in jail and such on page number 61, where it says that Chuck is suspended from the hockey team because he got into a fight. And it says, Chuck gave a sidelong glance. They are going to Brampton, but I got suspended. Uh-oh, said Noel. Fighting again? Yeah, admitted Chuck, knowing he'd inherited his dad's quick temper. But it was the other guy's fault. If a wise guy deliberately trips you when you're just heading for the net, what does the coach expect? So no Brampton trip for Chuck Riley. You coming or not? He asked Noel. So Noel is not going to go skating with him, and Chuck is not going to go on a hockey trip with his team. Very sad. But on page number 63, there's something a bit more sweet, or at least according to my notes, it says, this is so sweet. It says, as soon as the words were out of his mouth, he knew he'd put his foot in it. Chuck's dad was in jail for losing his temper and getting into a fight. Everyone knew he'd been provoked, but the law said that there was no excuse for strong-arm tactics. Noel hadn't meant to hurt his friend's feelings, but Chuck was obviously offended. And what does your dad know about being in jail? He stalked away, leaving Noel and Sophie to stare at each other in embarrassment. So, honestly, the audience doesn't find out why Chuck's dad is in jail until, like, a few books ago when I read it. It wasn't in the episode in the show at all. So it's interesting that every character knew exactly why Chuck and Pete's dad was in jail, but we didn't. Because they often act like they don't know why he's in jail. Like, they often accuse his dad of stealing or acting like really scared about it. And really, he didn't do anything morally wrong, just legally wrong. And then we also get a bit more information about Sophie's dad. This is really an episode all about dads. We get information about how her dad broke his back a little farther down on the same page. It says, Sophie hurried home. She'd wanted to open up the store, even if it was only for a short time that afternoon. She was enjoying being in charge while her mom was away in Sudbury for a few days. 6 weeks ago, her dad had slipped on the basement steps while carrying a heavy box down to the storeroom and damaged his back so badly that he'd been put in plaster from his hips to his shoulders ever since. Since he came home from the hospital, he'd had to stay in the bedroom, impatient to get back to the store. Her mom had almost decided not to go to her favorite niece's wedding, but Sophie and Aunt Christina, her dad's sister, had assured her that they could manage. Aunt Christina had promised to cook lunch and supper and to see that Mr. Brindicus was well looked after. Sophie had insisted that she could run the store and that everything would be fine. She'd helped often enough and knew the routine. She squelched through slushy snow on the Degrassi Street sidewalks, wearing her radio under her woolly cap, humming happily and looking forward to telling her dad about her brilliant career as a mathematician. So, the very next page has a picture of Degrassi Grocery, and there's snow falling around it, and the open sign is turned to the front door. But yes, we really just learned exactly what happened and how long it's been since it happened. And I really love that. We don't get that in the episode, and that's why the books are important. My next note is on page 70, and really it's a small one, but there's a kid customer in the store while Sophie is running it, and in the book it says that this kid customer is Cookie Peters, also known as Catherine Peters. But in the episode, it's definitely not Cookie. Like, I double and triple checked, it's not Cookie. Her IMDb says she's Emma McKinda, and she's just credited as young customer. She's literally only in this episode. While Cookie is played by Dawn Harrison, and she's credited for the 4 episodes that Cookie's actually in. So I don't know why the book says this is Cookie when it's not. But it says, the bundle buggy clinked and rattled away down the alley. It felt really heavy, and he figured he must have at least $5 worth. He bumped up the steps to the Degrassi Grocery. Sophie, wearing the radio around her neck, was ringing an order for Cookie Peters. When Chuck, eager for cash, interrupted with, "Hey, Soph, how much is all this worth?" She replied loftily, "I'm with a customer right now. Just put them down there." She turned back to Cookie. "That's $2.54, please." Chuck sighed with impatience and began to unload his buggy. Cookie dug a bunch of crumpled bills and change from her pocket and plopped them on the counter. Sophie stirred the money expertly with her finger, sorting the change from bills. She pushed a couple of pennies and a nickel back. This is such a side tangent, but editing me can't stop laughing at Nickelback. Nickelback. Okay. You gave me too much. You should really be careful. Cookie eyed a jar of jelly beans. How much are these? 2 cents each, replied Sophie. And then as Cookie reached into her pocket, she added, very much the gracious proprietor, it's okay. You can take one for free. Wow, thanks, Cookie said, stuffing the jelly bean in her mouth. She gathered up her groceries and left, accidentally colliding with Chuck's buggy. The pop bottles clattered, and Sophie looked pained. And I kind of read a little bit extra so it can go with my next note, where after we get a lovely picture of Sophie counting up all the bottles while Chuck stands holding his hockey stick at the cash register, on page number 72, it says, $3.20? Is that all? He couldn't believe it. It was going to take forever to get enough for his dad's Christmas present. He helped himself to a jelly bean. Jelly beans are 2 cents each, said Sophie coldly. So, some people were favored customers and others weren't. He tossed a couple of pennies on the counter. Here, and you owe me for the bottles. Are you sure it's only $3.20? Of course I'm sure. I do know how to add. She pointed to her radio to remind him that she'd won the math prize. So, I just found it very interesting that, he has this little thought process of, oh, so I'm not a favored customer, but, air quotes, Cookie is. And I just found that very interesting. I do wonder if maybe it was supposed to be Cookie, but they just weren't able to get her for that short amount of time. Because really it's only about maybe a minute of the episode, but maybe she was just busy that day or something. I'm really not sure. I don't know why they couldn't just name this random customer something else. But either way, I found that interesting and wanted to share that it was supposed to be Cookie or credited as Cookie in the book. I'm not really sure. Either way, pretty interesting. And my next note is on page number 75. This is also just a small tidbit kind of. And it just says, oh my gosh, he took Ida's recycling and made money from it. So, I don't know if y'all count that as stealing, but if you take my recycling or my glass bottles out of my yard and make money from it and don't give me any, I'm kind of upset. I did the work of drinking the soda from the glass bottles. I bought the soda in the glass bottles, and you're not gonna let me make some money off of that? Come on now. Anyway, it says, he was in luck. Back of Ida Lucas's house was a load of bottles in a plastic shopping bag. Either Ida or her brother Fred must have had a party, just in case there was any argument with Ida, something to be avoided at all costs. He took the bottles quickly and headed back to the store. So I will state, there probably would have been an argument with Ida. Ida's just like me. She would have been you're giving me a cut. Well, actually, I'm not really sure, because her and Chuck are close friends. They were hanging out with Noel in Noel Buys a Suit, so they're pretty close. They were hanging out without Noel and went to the donut shop without him in that same episode, which was 2 episodes ago. So I don't know. Maybe Ida would have been nice and let him have all the money. Or maybe she would have wanted a cut. I feel like Ida would have wanted a cut, but that's just me. I don't know. And my next note is on the same page. This is just such a small one, but when he goes to the store, he runs into Mr. Mackey. And my podcast is named after him. So I have to mention almost every time he's in an episode, it just has to be done. They give his 2 dogs that he's with at the store names, and they're really cute names. So I'm going to read about that a little bit. Mr. Mackey, one of their teachers from the Degrassi Street School, had come into the store to buy groceries, with the very noisy assistance of his two lively dogs, Reagan and Ryan. Sophie tucked the last of his purchases, two pink Delsey rolls, into his bag. There you go, Mr. Mackey. And when I was reading this, I did do some small research that I'm not going to get into in the podcast about what happened to colored toilet paper. Like, why does pink toilet paper no longer exist? And also, I headcanon that he didn't want pink toilet paper because he realized that it made him seem gay. Just because Bruce Mackey is a gay man, he lived all of his life in the closet to pretty much everyone except for Linda and a few small close friends. Like, really. So that's my headcanon, that he just did not want people to know that he was gay, and pink toilet paper seems gay. And that is why he asked to replace it with white rolls instead. And that leads us to my next note, where I just said, these dogs are a hot mess. I'm suspecting he didn't want pink TP because closeted. Yes, I really did make that note. It says, he unwound a dog leash from his leg and hauled Ryan to heel. Reagan immediately pulled on the other leash, making a bid for freedom. Mr. Mackey grasped both leashes in one hand and clutched the grocery bag to his chest. Impeded by dogs and purchases, he staggered towards the door. His eye was caught by a pyramid display of toilet rolls stacked on top of a cooler. He halted in his tracks. Sophie, would you mind if I change this pink paper for the white? No, not at all. Let me get it for you, offered Sophie, scurrying out from behind the counter. No problem. I can get it, said Mr. Mackey, tugging the pink rolls from his bag with the hand that held the dog leashes. With the other hand, he tried to take two white rolls from the display. Ryan and Reagan, anxious to get going, jerked at their leashes, yanking his arm and sending the pyramid toppling to the floor. His efforts to retrieve the scattered rolls, now being trampled by two excited dogs, only made things worse. He apologized all the way to the door as Sophie, on her knees, began to tidy up the mess. So, his dogs' names are Ryan and Reagan, and they really narrated exactly what the dogs were doing and which ones were doing what. And honestly, the dogs' names aren't exactly a big deal. We don't need them. So I'm just going to headcanon that they didn't need to make up names for these dogs, and these are probably their real names. And it's just the cutest fucking thing ever. Ugh. I love dogs. Like, I absolutely love dogs, and I love that those are 100% in my mind, in my headcanon, that does not matter at all. Those are his dogs, and those are the dogs that Linda had to watch in exchange for getting his house to film Ida Makes a Movie in. And don't even try to tell me that I'm wrong, or it doesn't matter, because it matters to me, and I am right. Anyway, my next note's on the next page. I had to diatribe, TED Talk about that, because it's important. So, my next note just says, poor Chuck, and it's just because of how upset he is about how little he's getting paid for this load of bottles. It says, yeah, said Sophie, but they're smaller, so they're worth less, dummy. And I haven't got many small bills right now. Could you come back later? I can wait. Chuck leaned on his elbows on the counter, discouraged. Saving up this way was just hopeless, but he wasn't leaving when she owed him money. Even if it was only a couple of bucks, he watched her rebuilding the pyramid. I will say, this episode makes me really dislike Sophie a lot of the time, because you don't need to call him a dummy. Like, it is very confusing how much all these little bottles are worth, and it's a lot to keep track of, and it's annoying that she's just like, dummy, or like, she's like, I know how to add. She's so stuck up. I feel bad for her because parentification, but like, it's so, just why do you gotta be like that? But my next note is actually that they worked well together, and it's part of the same page and then some of the next page. It says, arranging the toilet rolls led to straightening some of the goods on the shelves, and then to dusting and sweeping. They found that they had the same ideas about how the store displays should be set up. Chuck decided that when Sophie was in one of her better moods, she wasn't such a pain after all. And there is a picture of 2 packs of toilet paper rolls on like a bottom row and then 1 pack on top of them. And on page 80, he kind of starts asking her if she wants to go skating with him. And this is again when she calls him a dummy. It's kind of sweet though. I do feel bad for her this part because I can relate. It says, she bunched up her mouth, then burst out, "'Cause I don't have any skates, that's why." Didn't have skates? No one else Chuck knew didn't have their own skates. "What do you do when you go skating, then?" he asked, really curious. "I don't," Sophie said flatly. He was quite incredulous. "You don't go skating?" It was unheard of. Why not? It hurt Sophie to admit there was something she couldn't do. But she was forced to confess, "'Cause I don't know how to, dummy." "Oh," said Chuck, shaking his head. There sure were some oddball people in the world. He couldn't imagine not being able to skate. He took a sidelong look at her. He wondered how she'd react if he offered. Just at that moment, the shop bell rang, and a young woman in baseball cap, jeans, and a leather jacket, carrying some large boxes, came in. And I can really relate to this. I don't know how to ride a bike. Like, no one ever taught me how to. When I was a kid, I had a Razor scooter. Because when I was a kid, those were only like $20. And a bike was like 80. And I'm the youngest of 3. And my mom was a single mom. So, like, I just literally never learned how to ride a bike. Never had the chance to. Never really cared to because I had a scooter anyway that was way cheaper. And scooters were cool. Like, if you know, you know, the Razor scooter was the epitome of cool. So, I was the epitome of cool. I didn't need to learn how to ride a bike. I still don't know how to ride a bike. So, like, I'm relating to Sophie in this moment because I do have moments where people ask me, like, wait, you never learned how to ride a bike? And they feel so bad for me. Like, they pity me so much. And I'm just like, whatever. Like, why do I need to know this? Like, what is that going to help me with? I don't understand. If I want to go somewhere, I can just get a Razor scooter or, like, get in a car. Or, like, why do I need to learn how to ride a bike? I can ride an elliptical or, like, one of the elliptical bike thingies. But I don't know how to ride, like, an actual bike that isn't stuck in one place. But, like, why do I need to? But admitting it sometimes can be tough because you know people are judging you instantly. So I feel Sophie in that moment. She's like, I don't want to be judged. Like, I don't want to be judged as lower than, lesser than. Like, I'm okay. I'm cool. I'm a good person. It's okay. That's how Sophie feels, and that's how she wants to stay. She doesn't want to grow beyond this. But we are going to grow beyond this. We're going to go to my next note, which is on the very next page, which is page number 81, where we learn a little bit about Chuck's family. And did you know that Chuck has a sister? He says it in the episode, but I was like, this doesn't seem real. Like, I need to know more about this sister. So thankfully they do tell us more about her, But my note says, this sister only exists so he has a reason to have spare skates. But also, I hate her husband. Don't judge me, okay? I hate this imaginary sister's husband. And I'm going to elaborate on it. It says, my sister left her skates behind when she went to live in the States. He grinned. Her husband said there wasn't a lot of ice in Florida, so she left them. You could use them. And from that statement alone, I hate her husband. I hate him. This is so mean, but he just sounds like a douchebag. Like, sure, there wasn't a lot of ice in Florida, sure. But there's gotta be an ice rink somewhere in this state, right? Like, an indoor ice rink has to exist. You can't just tell her to leave behind her skates if they're really important to her. I don't actually know if this is important to her, to be honest. We never hear about this sister again, as far as I remember. So, like, I don't need to hate her husband, but I am a person with a lot of rage, and I have to put it somewhere. Okay, I hate this man, and it's just how I felt. So yeah, her husband said there's no ice in Florida. You don't need to have skates there. So she left her skates behind, and Chuck wants Sophie to learn how to skate with them. There's more on page number 82 when we get into a bit of their decorating the store together, and really I just love this episode, okay? I have a lot of notes about it because I love it. And it says, come on, Chuck encouraged her. It'll be good for business. He tossed her one end of the streamer. Here, take this. Well, she thought, it would make the store look nice and Christmassy. They could do it first and ask Papa afterwards, or even leave it for Mom to tell him. She delved into the box and brought out a season's greetings sign. Together, she and Chuck hung streamers all around the store, then stood back to admire their work, well pleased with themselves. And then they get a call. And in the episode, they don't say who the call is from, but in the book, they tell you it is Miss Cordelia Hines. And you may not remember, but Mrs. Cordelia Hines is the grumpy lady from Connie's newspaper route. During the episode, Connie goes to court. She's the one that Casey records for the court proceedings to, like, be a witness. And Pete says, I can't cross-examine a machine. So that is why that is thrown out of the court. But also because it's from Mrs. Hines, and everyone knows that Mrs. Hines is a big grouch, according to Judge Judy. So, anyway, that's who's on the phone. It says, a torrent of fury poured into her ear. She recognized the voice right off. It was Miss Cordelia Hines of number 82 Degrassi. Sophie could only get a few words into the angry flow. And there's a little bit more about it after they have, like, their little conversation. It says, there was a crack like a whip in her ear as Mrs. Hines slammed down her phone. Oh, shoot, she thought. It would have to be Miss Grouch. She'd forgotten. She was still staring blankly at the silent receiver when her dad thumped the floor above. And then my notes continue on the very next page, because they call her Grumble Guts, and I just found that really, really funny, so I had to point it out. It says, she whispered, almost as if her dad might hear through the floor, Miss Hines. Chuck pulled a face. All the Degrassi kids knew old Grumble Guts. So I just have to point that out because that's really funny. Grumble Guts. Like, it's just silly. It's cute. It's very kid-like and adorable. It's a little alliteration. Like, how could I not point that out? And page number 86 has my next notes, where it tells us the groceries that Linda Schuyler bought at the store during her famous scene. And to me, The groceries looked like something completely different in the episode, so I just had to point that out. It says, a few moments later, a smartly dressed woman click-clacked into the store in her shiny high-heeled boots. She bought a can of tuna, some cream cheese, and a packet of crackers, all of which Chuck was able to find without difficulty. He punched the buttons on the cash register a bit hesitantly, making sure he got it right. Perfect. The customer gave him a $20 bill. So, to me, it looked like she was buying like some cough syrup and soup and crackers. But it was a little bit blurry, so I could have just like been mistaken. Plus, this is like Canadian stuff, and I am American. So, again, it could just be exactly what they said it was, and it just looked different to me because Canadian food looks different, maybe? I don't really know. I just wanted to point it out. I just thought it was interesting. And then on page number 87, we get a few more notes. It says, he was just getting his break and, air quotes, payment. And it says, he glowed with satisfaction. It really felt like he owned the store. He picked Sophie's radio up and put it on, fiddling with the dials to get the station he wanted. He helped himself from the candy jar. He figured his help was worth more than a 2-cent jelly bean. He was still chewing it and listening to the radio when Sophie returned, still smarting from her session with Mrs. Hines. She snapped. And then she kind of freaks out on him about wearing the radio and worrying that he might have broken it somehow. I just found it interesting, like, he saw this as his payment. He was just being like, okay, I helped out. I'm worth a little. Let me take what I'm worth for a little minute and have a break. And honestly, I can relate. I've done this when babysitting sometimes. Like, I'll take a break during my lunch break. The kid's, like, taking a nap. And I'm like, okay, let me watch their Netflix while the kid naps and eat my lunch that I packed from home. Like, I take a lunch to work and let me relax and watch their streaming service. And I have gotten yelled at before by people I've worked for this kind of stuff. And I'm like, your kid's napping. I'm just watching Netflix while I eat. I watch their shows on the same exact Netflix when they want to watch TV. So, like, why can't I watch one show I want? And it's not like I'm watching anything inappropriate. Usually it's like Friends or whatever. So, honestly, I get where Chuck's coming from. That's what I'm trying to say. But apparently Sophie doesn't. And I guess she's just still upset about Mrs. Hines, according to the book. I'm guessing that's what smarting means. I can double check, but I don't feel the need to. I think I'm right. Anyway, on page number 89, they have their big fight, and she gets around to begrudgingly thanking him, and Chuck says, that's better. I'll look around for those skates for you. She says, I don't know about trying to skate, she began, but he had gone. He'd left his bundle buggy behind. She moved it out of the way behind the counter. The December afternoon darkened early, so the store lights had been on since about 3:30. Sophie congratulated herself that she'd been busy all day. Her dad would be pleased with her. She'd only had a sandwich and some juice at lunch to save closing the store, and now she was starving. She hoped Aunt Christina, who was busy in the kitchen, had prepared something that tasted as good as it smelled. She was looking forward to sitting down to eat. She had to admit she was getting a bit tired. Her aunt came through the store. It's all ready, Sophie, and I've taken a tray up to your papa. Thanks, Aunt Christina. See you tomorrow. Night, honey. Take care. Sophie flipped the sign over to close and locked the door. And then Noel comes while she's counting up the sales and the money. And then there's a drawing of her at the cash register counting up the bills. And my next note just says, so $2 bills are common there, I guess. Because it says, she'd counted and totaled the dollar bills, the $2 bills, and the fives when there was a urgent rapping at the door. She could see Noel Kennard peering through the glass. So, yeah, she totaled the dollar bills and the $2 bills and the fives. So, $2 bills are common there, which makes sense because loonies and toonies, we've all heard of those. Which, honestly, I've always headcanoned that that's where the name Looney Tunes comes from. Although it's probably not. But who's going to tell me I'm wrong? Don't you dare. Canada's awesome. Anyway, page 93 kind of tells me that something I misheard in the episode is not actually what it said. So in the episode, I thought he said, in your mind, not mastermind. And I don't know why. I just didn't hear it very well. But it says, I should have $20 more. Maybe you added it up wrong, mastermind. So, because she added up the math in her mind, like without using a calculator, I just thought he said, maybe you added it up wrong in your mind, because that's how she was adding it up. But the book says mastermind, so I'm obligated to believe that he actually said mastermind, and I just misheard him. So, in case you misheard him too, there you go. And then my next note isn't until page number 97, and it's about Sophie and Chuck getting into another small fight. And it says, Sophie snarled at him. Why not? That's what you are. You probably learned it from your dad. I bet that's why he's in jail. So, earlier in the book, it said everyone knew why his dad was in jail, and it wasn't for stealing, it was for fighting. So, Sophie really acts like she doesn't know. Like, she really says, I bet that's why your dad's in jail. It says, now Chuck was really mad. No one picked on his dad and got away with it. He squared up to Sophie. That's not why he's in jail, and you know it. Sophie sneered. I bet it is. And I bet you'll go to jail too, when I tell my dad. So she thought she'd scare him, did she? Don't you threaten me, he growled. I'll threaten you all I like till you give me my money back. She was closing in now, as if for the kill. By now, Chuck was so furious, he was itching to hit her right on her aggressive chin. If only she was a guy instead of a girl. Boy, would she see stars. Sophie didn't have any qualms about physical violence. Her hand shot out and shoved Chuck as he backed away from her. Shoved him not once, but twice. So yeah, he refuses to hit a girl. She does not refuse to hit a boy. She hits him. Well, technically she shoves him. Not once, but twice. I only noticed once in the episode, but I'm still inclined to believe it. And my next note is on page 100. There's a lot of notes in this episode. And it says, so, did he go to the store hoping to apologize? So sweet. Chuck considered it. He'd only had one customer, and he was sure he'd got the money right. And Sophie seemed so sure she couldn't be wrong. You could at least talk to her about it, suggested Noel. Talk to her. Chuck shook his head. But he thought about it, and really, what else could he do? Maybe I'm a saphead, he said to himself, but I'll try it. So I just really thought it was funny. He's a saphead. Like, that's a cute little saying I don't hear a lot. He'd nearly reached the store when Sophie came out with a money pouch under her arm. She stuck the back in 15 minutes sign to the door. As she put the door key in her pocket, she turned and saw Chuck. They'd eyed each other like bristling cats. And basically then it goes into the scene in the episode. I just thought it was interesting to kind of read their thoughts before we get to my next note on page 104, where my note says, how worried she is that she'll look dumb. And it's kind of just emphasizing my point that I made earlier when I referenced how I don't know how to ride a bike and Sophie doesn't know how to skate, that really we're just kind of prideful about it and we don't really like talking about it much because we don't want to look dumb and we want to remain thinking that we're pretty decent and we just don't need to know these things. It says, he'd never forgive her. She'd have to apologize. However much it hurt her pride. He must really think she was a creep. She wondered where she'd find him, and if she'd have to go to his house and admit her mistake in front of his brother Pete. There sure would be a big neighborhood newscast after that. Hey, Chuck had still had those skates with him. Maybe he was at the rink. She was on the step of the store, thinking she'd just have to risk staying closed a little longer, when Miss Mackenzie, laden with packages, came along Degrassi from the direction of the street car stop, humming a carol. So, in case the name Mrs. Mackenzie sounds familiar to you, you might recognize that Mrs. Mackenzie is the same woman who is walking up during Pete Takes a Chance when Lisa roller skates down the ramp, and that is our next episode in this book. So I really like the order that they put these in, where this comes before that, so it kind of will stick out in your memory. And I'll point it out again when we get to that point. But yes, Mrs. Mackenzie lives right next door to Degrassi Grocery, and she is going to watch the store while Sophie goes to apologize to Chuck. And we get to that point during my next note on page 107, where my next note says, they skated for half an hour. So it says, she wondered about the store, about Mrs. Mackenzie and her dad. Maybe they can manage without me for half an hour, she thought. She sat on a bench and tried the skates on. To her surprise, they were quite comfortable. Chuck helped her to get up and steadied her as she tottered to the ice. And there is a picture of after Sophie falls on the rink, and there's two hockey pucks next to them. They're at the little goal that he had set up, and she's on the ice with one leg sprawled out and the other one bent, and he's holding onto her hand trying to help her up. And that is the last note in the novelization of this episode. So now we go into our next story with Chuck's brother Pete in Pete Takes a Chance, which is episode number 8. And it starts on page 111. And my first note just says, it's November? That feels off considering 2 episodes ago it was Christmas. But then I did some Googling, and it says that Sophie Minds the Store came out on December 20th, 1982, and Pete Takes a Chance came out on January 2nd, 1983. So I'm just going to assume that Pete Takes a Chance somehow came out in a different timeline where this actually happened before Christmas, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So let's just assume that Pete Takes a Chance and that whole storyline was before Sophie minded the store with Chuck. And I'll read in the book where it says that this is November. It says, Pete Riley and Lisa Kennard waited impatiently at the top of the winding concrete walkway above Jared Square shopping mall. Their breath hung like a frosted smoke of chill in the November air. Pete did a few Michael Jackson steps to warm his feet and ease his restlessness. Lisa rolled around on her red-wheeled skates occasionally giving herself bear hugs and slapping her arms, or rubbing the tip of her icy nose with her gloves. They had been waiting for more than a quarter of an hour, and Lisa was beginning to think that Pete's latest money-making scheme wasn't so great after all. And that is when we get a little bit more information about this. It says, a few days ago, Pete had read that the local paper, the East End News, was paying $25 for the most offbeat picture of the week. All you had to do was let the paper know when and where, and they'd send a staff photographer to take the shot. Right away, Pete came up with an idea he knew was a surefire winner. If someone roller skated down the zigzag walkway and took off from a ramp at the bottom, they'd leap into the air like a skier before landing in the Gerrard Square parking lot. What a picture that leap would make! The $25 was practically in Pete's pocket. The only trouble was, he couldn't organize the world's greatest roller event and do it too. And this is where my next note is. It says, OMG, Lisa wasn't his first choice. It says, he wasn't that good at roller skating. He wasn't even the best roller skater on Degrassi Street. He had to find someone to perform the stunt. His big brother Chuck, he decided, would be perfect. Pete took him aside and suggested a 50-50 partnership. Chuck's reply? No way am I going to risk my neck for $12.50 that I might not even get. None of the other kids wanted to know either, except Martin Schlegel. He offered to try, if Pete advanced the money. Martin never took anything lightly. And honestly, I love that they put Martin here because it really underlines some of the tension that we get later on in the episode that we wouldn't have really understood why. I just kind of automatically assumed that they never really liked each other anyway, because Martin's kind of a loner. Like, that's kind of how Martin's always been to me, is just a little bit of a loner. But this makes a lot of sense. So it continues, it says, Martin never took anything lightly, and I should get more than half anyway, because I'd be doing all the dangerous stuff. $15 down first, Pete, and it's a deal. Somehow, put that way, the odds didn't seem worth it. Then Pete heard that Lisa Kennard was doing a lot of babysitting, trying to earn enough money to buy her dad a wallet for his birthday. The perfect partner. He sought her out and started with a soft sell. Look, you could babysit all your life, Lisa, and not make $25. This is a fast and easy way to make money. Just a side note here, how do you babysit all of your life and not make $25? That feels like the dumbest pitch ever. Like, I know this is like 1970s money, but $25? I feel like you would only need like a month worth of babysitting to make $25 back in 1970. I could be wrong. Anyway, it says, you could have $12.50 in your hand by next week. Lisa was tempted. $12.50 plus what she'd already saved would be almost enough money for a really nice wallet. Maybe she could get her dad a keychain too. So I don't know how much she already had saved at that moment. Editing me is here to say not a lot, probably like $6. Because she gives Pete $13 for the jokes, and they won $5. And at that time, the 13 was the newspaper money and babysitting money put together. When they were doing the math in the episode, it seemed like $10. And I feel like math-wise, that's like $22.50 altogether. How is that almost enough for a really nice wallet? Like, are you wanting a leather wallet? Because I feel like that should be more than enough for a nice wallet. Unless it's leather, then it's not. But anyway, we get a little bit more information about how they built the ramp and what they were doing to prepare for the picture farther down on that same page. page 114, it says, a little hesitantly, Lisa agreed. Pete eagerly contacted the paper and made a date with the staff photographer. And my note says, my parents would be so pissed off at this, what is basically stealing. It says, then Lisa found some wood in her dad's garage, and without telling her parents, helped Pete build a ramp at the foot of the walkway. Before setting off that day, she pinned some really fancy tinsel stars on her leg warmers and draped a cardboard sign across her chest saying Lisa the Great. Pete had borrowed one of his mom's old sheets, also without telling her about it, and painted on it in huge letters, the world's greatest roller skating attempt. The sheet was now flapping vigorously on the walkway wall. Everything was set, but where was the press photographer? So yeah, they stole some wood from her dad, which he could have been wanting to use in his contracting business to make real money where he could buy his own damn wallet. And Pete stole some old sheets, which I'm just saying, old sheets could be used to make clothing or something else that the family actually needs, instead of using it for one of Pete's lousy scams that don't even work. Anyway, my next note is on page 117, where we get to learn a bit more about Mrs. Mackenzie. Like I said earlier, in Sophie Minds the Store, Mrs. Mackenzie is the lady who walks up the ramp area before Lisa runs into her. And it says, Pete, wildly excited, hung over the wall, pointing to the car park. The photographer, still on the stairs, focused his camera on the walkway. All he could see of Lisa were glimpses of her scarlet helmet flashing between concrete posts as she spun round the zigzag curves. Her voice floated back up. Help! I can't stop! Help! Down in the car park, Mrs. Mackenzie, loaded with grocery bags, was approaching the walkway. She paused by the ramp for a few moments, puzzling over it, then shrugging, stepped round and began plodding up the slope. The flying figure in the red helmet whizzed towards her. So she did pause by the ramp for a few moments, puzzling. Like, she was confused, but she shrugged and stepped around it. Like, she was just like, I don't know. And then on the next page, we get our first picture of this. And it is Lisa after she, crashes into the garbage cans. And she's wearing her helmet with little paper stars on it. And the garbage can is turned over. And she's, got some tomatoes and a broken egg around her. And she's got, a bunch of tinsel around her neck. It says, Pete and the photographer pelted down the walkway, skidded through the broken eggs, and slid to a stop on their backsides at the shopper's feet. The poor woman, overcome, gave up her struggle to stay upright and flopped down in the omelet, gasping. All that could be seen of Lisa were her legs, sticking out from the garbage cans, her skate wheels still spinning. Lisa, you okay? She gave a strangled moan and struggled to sit up. Her cardboard sign was bent and tangled around her neck. Her jacket was torn and dirty. Her tinsel stars looked like they belonged on last year's Christmas tree. She pushed up the visor of her helmet and glared at Pete. You and your big ideas, Pete Riley. The photographer chose that moment to snap her picture. Pete beamed. We're going to win for sure, Lisa. You'll see. Lisa was too furious to speak. She ignored his offers of help, scrambled painfully to her feet, unstrapped her skates, and limped away. 2 days later, the picture of Lisa the Great among the garbage cans, captioned Pratfall of the Mighty, appeared in the East End News. It won third prize. The $25 for the picture of the week went to an old lady on Carlisle Avenue who'd put a sombrero and a pair of shades on her poodle. Lisa was really mad. She'd sprained her wrist, bruised her shoulder, and made a nerd of herself. All for $5. When Pete, with a great show of generosity, told her to keep all the prize money, she could barely bring herself to answer him. It was a couple of days before she'd speak to him again. By that time, he'd come up with another surefire notion. So, I just thought all that was really interesting. And my next note is on page 123. It says, I wonder if she really knew that or not. It says, a sardonic laugh was followed by, yeah, us and a million other people. No way, Pete. Throw your money away if you want to. Ha ha, Pete thought. She knows I don't have any. He muttered to Billy behind his hand, come back later. I have to work on this. He winked. Save some good ones for me. So, I do wonder if his mom actually knew that he didn't have any money or not. Because, honestly, it's not mentioned in the episode. He just thinks that she knows that. And she could know that. She could. I wouldn't be surprised. Because, she obviously doesn't give them allowance or anything like that. Chuck has his newspaper route. But Pete isn't seen with having a job. And he does have all these little schemes. Sometimes they might work, I don't know. But this one didn't. So, maybe she really does know. He has no money for the raffle. And then the very next page has my next note. And it says, see, Pete has always been money hungry. Because the book says, yeah, Chuck agreed. But it doesn't seem fair. You get a job to earn money, not lose it. His mom gave a, that's life, I guess, shrug. You'll just have to keep after them. Chuck scowled at the receipts. Maybe if I bug them enough, they'll get tired of it and pay me. Pete, who usually listens to any conversation about money, even if only with half an ear, suddenly tuned out completely. His whole attention was focused on an ad in his Green Lantern comic, under a banner headline saying, Fun Factory, your big chance, was a drawing of a boy and a girl smiling like they were in a toothpaste commercial. No wonder both were clutching handfuls of dollar bills. The ad could have been meant just for Pete. It said, we are looking for a few good boys and girls who would like to earn money and gain practical business experience for only $10. Start your own joke-selling business. Success guaranteed. Send now. Boy, Pete thought, studying the two kids. They sure look successful. He pictured himself in front of a camera, his fists clutching money. He made a note of the box number address. All he needed was $10 to start him off on the path to riches. He waited until bedtime to ask his brother for the money. And my next note is actually just about that conversation. On page number 127, it says, I double-checked and this line isn't in the show. And the line in question is when it says, Chuck could tell Pete was about to make his usual protest. But that was different. They italicized different, so I emphasize that. So he said it himself first. Oh, I know. That was different. Dad was trying to get back what was owed him, but he took a chance, doing it the way he did. He plunged his hands into the basin of water and splashed the water onto his face. Why don't you just get a job if you want to earn money? He asked through the drips. That's what I'm trying to do, but I need money to earn money. So how do I get some? I can't do your thinking for you, Chuck said, drying his face. You figure it out. He flung the towel at Pete's head and left the bathroom. So I just want to state real quickly that if you have to pay your way to get a job, aside from buying a nice outfit for an interview or something of that matter, that's kind of normal. It's most likely a multi-level marketing scheme, and I will advise against it. If you have to pay money to make money, it's not a good idea. And we learn all about that in this episode, where my next note is on page 133. My next note is literally just a few small details I found interesting. According to the note, it says, looking at Pete, Lisa wasn't at all sure she'd done the right thing. Her dad's wallet seemed further out of reach than ever. 4 days later, Pete arrived home from school to find a very large package waiting for him. The sender's address was on the side. Fun Factory Inc., Windsor, Ontario. Wow, he was in business. He staggered off, clutching the parcel, to share the good news with Lisa. At the corner of Danforth, he spotted an orange Beck taxi cruising for fares. It looked like, it was cab number 2426, with his mom at the wheel. He waved and she pulled up beside him. So I just found it interesting that it was 4 days later, and the Fun Factory was in Windsor, Ontario, as well as he knew the cab number right away. It's 2426. Just some very interesting little details that I like. And on the next page, I have another note for Pete's sassy thought. It says, she sighed again. Look, Pete, why don't you get a paper route like Chuck if you want to earn money? What was she, deaf? Or had she already forgotten Chuck's beef the other evening about guys that didn't pay up? So I just thought it was funny. She's like, deaf, according to him? Like, he's just so sassy about it in his little mind. Anyway, it says, I'm not like Chuck, he said. He'll never be rich in a million years. He wished she wouldn't look at him in that reproachful way. He was only trying to be a go-getter instead of a plotter. And I had to do some Googling because I didn't know what a plotter was. P-O-L-D-D-E-R. It says, someone who works slowly and continuously, but without imagination, enthusiasm, or interest. So apparently Chuck is without imagination, enthusiasm, or interest. He says, I can make more money and faster than he can. She gave him a steady glance as she drew up outside Lisa's house. Faster's not always better. You should know that, Pete. It's like gambling. But this isn't gambling. It's a sure thing. And I just found that so interesting that, like, he's really sassy. He just knows he's going to get the money and faster. And it's got to be better because it's faster and creative and imaginative. He's got enthusiasm. And the next note is on page 140 after he already gets to Lisa's house and they're at school the next day and they're all set up in the hallways selling. And my note is, I'm not sure why I never even thought about this part. Because it says, next day they set up their stalls at break time in the school stairwell, hoping any teachers who saw them would think someone else had given them permission. So I just never even thought that, like, oh yeah, they should be getting permission to sell items in the middle of the school hallway. It completely slipped my mind. I never even thought of it. And yeah, they did not get permission, but they kind of just figured that someone would guess they had permission if they just set up and got to going. And on page 141, we get a good picture of Pete at his little stand, selling his jokes with his arrow through his head. And my note says, I like that they show that some people just aren't salespeople, but considering the sexism in comedy, it doesn't feel great that a girl can't sell jokes, especially with people being mad at Lisa later on. And that is because it says, Lisa's business wasn't quite so brisk, but she tried hard. Only 50 cents, no tax. Be the hit of the neighborhood. Play a joke on your teacher. She could hear Pete on the other side of the stairwell, catching customers as they went up and down the stairs. Step right up. and get your jokes 1,000 laughs. She raised her voice. Buy your jokes here. This is your big chance. You won't regret it. She wished she'd made a sign as big as Pete's. Hers only said jokes for sale, but Pete's in large colored letters announced Pete's jokes, special offer, closing down sale. But now, avoid disappointment, only a few left. Honestly, that's a huge sign that says a whole bunch. I would just not be in the mood to read it all, but whatever. My note says, it also kind of shows that the businesses are too close to each other when they're selling the same things. Feels very MLM, as in multi-level marketing. Also love seeing how the teachers feel because we didn't see that in the show. And the book goes on to say, it was almost true that Pete only had a few left. Pete had done such good business, his stock was getting low. As kids drifted by Lisa's stall, they were wearing Google eyes, false noses, and gorilla masks. The few teachers who came along the corridor and crossed the stairwell mostly raised their eyes in resignation or looked the other way. But Mrs. Gonzalez warned, the jokes must stop at the classroom door. And Mr. Mackey was even more direct. Any gorillas, Marx Brothers, or bleeding corpses in my class will soon find themselves in the principal's office. Pete was busy totaling up his takings when Billy Martin stopped at his table. So my next note's on the very next page, and it just says, so Billy bought the slide viewer to be nice, and Martin had 2 black eyes. Because the book says, I'll take 5 for now. Pete felt like a real big shot. I'll take more later. More tickets, more chances, eh? Sure thing, agreed Billy. In good humor after the ticket sale, he bought a joke slide viewer and went off in the direction of the schoolyard. It wasn't long before Martin Schlegel came by as serious as ever. Pete hadn't seen much of him since they disagreed over the roller skating stunt. Seeing him now, he suppressed a grin. Martin looked rather like a giant panda with 2 huge black eyes. He guessed where the black had come from. Billy had conned Martin into looking through the slide viewer. And in the episode, we only see him look through it on one eye, and he only has one big black eye that kind of looks like a panda. So my brain instantly went to, oh, is the other black eye like he got punched or something? Really, I'm not sure. It didn't look like he had a physical black eye. That wasn't a joke in the episode. And in the episode, he only has one round joke black eye. So I'm not sure where it came from. But that's not that important, I guess, because my next note is kind of important. A little bit lower down the page, and it says, that was a little boy, not Judy. So in our last episode, they put Cookie in the place of a nameless kid character, and in this episode, they put Judy Erickson in the place of a nameless kid character that they could have just kept and given a fake name. And the book says, Judy Erickson slapped a joy buzzer down in front of Pete. Hey, this doesn't work. Oh shoot, thought Pete. The dud one. This is the one that he and Lisa tested in the house that didn't work one time. So the dud one. He already knew about it. His excuse came out pat. I know, but that's the point. People expect it to do something, so it really surprises them when it doesn't. Yeah, said Judy, unconvinced. Well, I don't call that a big joke. Are you sure this thing isn't broken? Tell you what I'll do, offered Pete, eyeing Martin and not wanting to lose a possible customer. I'll make a deal with you. I'll exchange this one for another at no charge. Okay, agreed Judy. There you go, said Pete grandly, taking back the dud buzzer. You won't regret it. I hope not, said Judy, or else I'll be back. No problem, Pete promised. If you're not satisfied, you can have your money back. And then Martin finds the plastic vomit, and that is all in the episode. But I just wanted to point out that they replaced this nameless boy with Judy Erickson. So this nameless boy is played by Andy Daravongsa. Daravongsa. Pronouncing it Daravongsa. I don't actually know. He's only in this one episode. And he's just credited as dissatisfied customer. While Judy Erickson is played by Bree McKibben, which you may have remembered from when I did the novelization for Connie Goes to Court, because I Googled her there. My next note just says, this conversation is different here, but I like the larger amounts of detail that it gives. Because it says, Martin scowled at him. I don't want to be the hit of the neighborhood. I just want my mom to think I'm sick. Your mom will think you're an ambulance case. I guarantee it, says Pete. She doesn't need to think I'm terminal, Pete. Just sick is all. So in the episode, they don't say anything about being an ambulance case or not being terminal. And honestly, I like that they don't do that in the episode because that's just not something kids would say to me. Like, most kids in elementary school wouldn't even know the word terminal. It just feels obvious to me that they would know what an ambulance is, but I don't think someone would say you're an ambulance case. They would say, like, your mom will think she needs to call an ambulance. Just, like, slightly different terminology. But I like that they give this little conversation because it shows more of why Martin's so upset when it doesn't work. Like, he just wants to seem sick. And Pete is sitting here saying, oh, your mom will think you need an ambulance. She's going to think it's severe, when that's definitely not what happens. But at least later on, Pete was nice enough to let him know about the prank that Billy Martin pulled on him on the next page. It says, Martin let his $2 go and pocketed the fake vomit. Hours of fun, 1,000 laughs, Pete promised. Oh, and Martin, you'd better go look in a mirror. So while he didn't say the exact, like, hey, someone pulled a prank on you, he did say, go look in a mirror. And then when he looks in the mirror, he finds out that there was a prank pulled on him. And my next note is on page 148. It says, in the episode, he doesn't tell Pete the whole story, because we got to see it happen. But this works better for a book version. So in the episode, we do see Martin's mom pick up the vomit and give Martin a good slap across the face. And in the book, it just says, my mom didn't believe I was sick. I put this stuff on the supper table while she was in the kitchen. Then my brother shouted, hey, Mom, Martin puked. So Mom came back, picked up the vomit, wiped it off with a dishcloth, and put it down again. Then she slapped my wrist and went back to the kitchen. So, Martin finished, I'm not satisfied. And you promised. So, while I do think it would be a little bit more interesting if maybe we got some kind of context of, like, the teachers call the parents and tell them, and then Martin's mom says, like, hey, your teachers called me and let me know that this kind of stuff could happen. Like, they let me know someone's selling pranks in the hallways. I think that could have been pretty interesting. But at the same time, it's also just really funny to be like, oh yeah, parents are just smart. We don't need that context. Because also Degrassi has that Bible. They have the Book of Rules when they're filming the show that this is from the kids' point of view. So we wouldn't get that kind of scene anyway. But I think it would be interesting if we did. But yeah, parents are just smart. Like, also, he didn't make any kind of noises that would have indicated throwing up. And I'm not going to make those noises because this is an audio medium and a lot of people are grossed out by those noises. But, like, we all know the fake vomiting noises that people make on TV. He didn't make any of those in the episode. So that's probably why no one fell for it. And then in the next part, when he's doing the prank with Mr. Mackey, he just gets in trouble. No one thinks he's sick, which is what he wanted. He just gets in trouble, which is the opposite of what he wanted, which is why he still wants his money back. And he's also not giving Lisa her money when she's working for him. We see this on page 151 when my note says, I wouldn't trust this at all. And it's just because Pete says, don't worry, by tomorrow you'll be able to get your dad the best wallet in the world. Lisa says, why tomorrow? Are you going to pay me tomorrow? He winked and tapped the side of his nose. Wait and see. See you later. I wouldn't trust that at all. Like, that is such beating around the bush awkwardness. Although, my next note is just that they changed Martin's brother's name. So in the episode, they're calling him Leon. They call him Leon and Moose. Moose is still his nickname in the book. In the books, his name is Mervyn. So I am just very curious why they went from Mervyn to Leon. These are very different names. But I also didn't realize that he was a 6th grader, which is strange compared to Lisa being a 4th grader. So in the book it says, still in the classroom, Lisa was just about to leave when she became aware of someone watching her. Mervyn Schlegel, Martin's big brother from grade 6, nearly filled the doorway. Editing me is noticing that this is some fatphobic stuff. Thinking that he had come for Martin, Lisa smiled, wondering why Mervyn's usually good-natured face looked so grim. So I will say they may have changed his name from Mervyn to Leon because Mervyn and Martin, very similar. So similar. Like saying that out loud, Mervyn Martin, that's too much. It's too similar. That's a tongue twister for sure. And my next note is actually just a picture description, because in the picture, they drew it as if Martin was there when Moose was threatening to beat up Lisa. They drew Lisa standing across from Mervyn as he's holding up his fist, and a little boy with a smug glare on his face is right behind him. But in the episode, Martin's not there. Nobody else is there, and it's just Mervyn / Moose / Leon confronting Lisa, whom I want to point out did not sell Martin the vomit. That was Pete. And I kept hoping that the book would explain to me why Lisa was confronted when she did not sell Martin the vomit. She barely sold any of her stock compared to what Pete sold, according to the book and the episode. But my next note just says, in the scene where Pete tells Lisa about the 20 tickets, she says Moose's name is Leon, not Mervyn. And IMDb has him listed as Leon / Moose for all 4 episodes. Also, the show said 20, not 30, because it doesn't explain. So I would have loved that explanation in this book, but instead it just says, he hadn't been going to tell her until the triumphant moment, but now he had to. We'll have the money, lots of it, when we win. I bought 30 tickets for the raffle. You did what? Gasped Lisa. You bought raffle tickets with my money? It's okay, we can't lose. We've got 30 chances. And at least one of them is lucky. I know it. So in the episode, he only buys 20. I don't know why they went from 30 to 20. Maybe to make it seem like it was less money so people would be less upset at him. That's the only explanation I could come up with. And then my next note is for page 159. It just says, they kept this conversation mostly the same, but they cut a couple of the lines that are here. And this is the conversation between Chuck and Pete about Pete using Lisa's money to buy the raffle tickets. And it just says, Pete had never felt so misunderstood. It wasn't fair blaming him for trying, making him feel like a worm. All he wanted was to do Lisa a good turn and make a bit of money for himself, too. It wasn't a crime, was it? He took the raffle tickets out of his pocket. I was only using her money. I wasn't using her. Did you ask her first? Lisa trusted you, Pete. But I'm lucky, he insisted. I can feel it. Chuck's sneer was nearly a snarl. Why don't you start thinking about how other people feel? He got up and went out of the room, leaving Pete to think it over. I'm lucky, Pete told himself after his brother had gone. I know it. I can feel it. But just suppose, as an outside chance, he was wrong. How would he feel telling Lisa how would she feel when she didn't get that wallet? And then on the next page, there's just a little bit more information about the carnival. It says, the school carnival the next day was a big success. The hall looked very festive, decked with multicolored streamers and banners. Lights were flashing and disco music throbbed. Kids were milling around buying pop and hot dogs or playing games for prizes at the booths. On stage where the raffle was to be drawn, a large wheel of fortune spun round and round. Lisa slid in at the side door, hoping to disappear into the crowd. So, during the episode, you'll remember a spinning wheel as a way to transition from scene to scene, but that's good to know that they tell you, this is part of the carnival, and the carnival was held by the school. My next one says, interesting to add in Lisa overhearing this conversation with Pete and Billy Martin. It says, she'd left her arrival as late as she dared, hoping that Moose and Martin would give up waiting for her. She wouldn't have come to the carnival at all, except she was desperate to pay Moose off before it was over. Maybe, just maybe, the raffle would save her skin. She stood on tiptoe, peering around. There was no sign of Pete, but there was Moose, with Martin close behind him, heading in her direction. She ducked behind a booth, so scared she even held her breath, so they wouldn't hear her. As soon as she dared, she peeped out. The Schlegels had vanished, but she caught a glimpse of Pete talking to Billy Martin. Oh no, she thought, not more raffle tickets. Billy's voice floated her way, above the sound of the music. Last chance for raffle tickets. Last chance to win $100 for only $1. Only a few left. She started across the hall. If Pete could afford to buy raffle tickets, then he could spare a couple of dollars to pay off the Schlegels. She must stop him spending the last of his money before it was too late. She grew careless in her haste and cannoned into someone solid and felt her heart go bump in horror. It was Moose. So I just thought that was interesting that she overheard some of their conversation but didn't get to overhear all of it to understand that he was actually trying to sell back his tickets. And then on the next page there's just a small picture of when, after Pete sells some of his tickets to people, Pete is finally giving Moose and Martin the money back, and Lisa's just holding his arm. And in the background, there's a banner that says raffle today. That is the next page. And then on page 165, my note says, I like seeing how Pete caught her up to speed with the little she missed during her run-in with Moose. It just says, I sold my raffle tickets, he answered simply. He couldn't resist a little boast. I just undercut Billy by 25 cents. Told folks I held all the winning tickets and sold them for 75 cents each. I even sold one to Martin Schlegel. Lisa gazed at him, speechless, as up on the stage, Mr. Mackey, acting as master of ceremonies, began to make an announcement. And then it goes the same as the episode does. And my last note isn't about the book itself, but instead in the About the Series section, where they added in the more recent awards that the show has won since the last couple of books when I read these. So it says, among their many international prizes are the prestigious Prix Geniche Award, which is an international Emmy, a Gemini, and a Ruby Slipper from the 1986 Los Angeles Film and Television Festival. Those are the updated awards for Kids of Degrassi Street. Coming up soon, I will be doing a few bonus episodes before I get into the actual Degrassi Junior High series, which will start with Exit Stage Left. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode, and thank you for listening. If you would like to keep up with me and the podcast, I have actually made a podcast exclusive Instagram called Bruce Mackey Library.